With a serene expression, Huyen decided to reveal the identity of the possible culprit. Everyone began to look at her with a curious expression. Huyen remained silent, until several seconds later, with eyes shining with confidence, she revealed that the culprit was a ghost. The faces of Yoon and Seol were filled with sweat and their eyes widened in surprise, leaving them in shock. Huyen nodded her head. Soryung's eyes filled with confusion since he was thinking that she was going to say something profound. He didn't know why she suddenly started talking about ghosts. With a curious expression, Soryung began to touch his chin and started thinking about it. He remembered encountering the ghost of the blue-spotted centipede after it died, so this situation wasn't so absurd. Soryung extended his hand and asked Seol if by any chance she had touched or done something strange lately, like eating the inner core of a spiritual beast. Seol began to ponder and with a serious gaze revealed that she had recently touched an acorn and also a tree branch. Soryung and Huyen began to sweat and felt confused, realizing that this was what they called idiotic charm. Seol's eyes widened in surprise. She clasped her hands and remembered something. She revealed that while she was training alone at night, she felt the presence of someone. It was as if someone had been watching her all the time. With a confused expression, Yoon asked her sister if this was true. Seol nodded her head. She had no doubt about it. She had clearly felt it. At first she thought it was Yoon, and when she went to check there was no one. She put her hand on her chin and couldn't help but wonder if she was being too sensitive. Soryung began to observe her, knowing that this was a suspicious situation. While they were distracted, a maid came running. Upon hearing her voice, the sister's attention focused on her. With a face full of sweat and while panting heavily, the maid revealed that something terrible had happened. Upon hearing this, with a worried expression, Seol asked what was going on. The maid clenched her fists and revealed that another villager had disappeared. She also mentioned that the warriors had left the clan's territory to begin the search. With a confused gaze, Yoon asked if this was true. Seol began to look down at the ground and couldn't help but feel furious. Soryung's attention fixed on her. With a calm expression he asked if she was okay. Seol's eyes began to shine with determination. No matter what, she had to catch the ghost personally and avenge the affront against her lost chastity. Yoon clenched her fists and with a serious gaze asked her sister not to go, since if she sneaked out alone again and was caught, this time it was going to be a very serious problem. Seol started to think, and then with a smile, asked Yoon not to worry. Then she turned towards Soryung and Huyen, and revealed that this time they were not going alone. With a confused gaze, Yoon asked what she meant by that. Seol approached Huyen and grabbed her hand, and with a sad expression asked if the two of them were willing to help her. Soryung and Huyen's eyes widened in surprise, leaving them in shock. Night fell and somewhere in the forest there was a small owl sitting on a branch. When it turned around it saw Soryung and the others searching the area. With her body trembling and her eyes full of tears, Yoon grabbed Huyen by the arm knowing that if she was caught this time, they were going to lock her up in the closed cultivation room. Then she thought she would be trapped there for at least half a year. Upon hearing this, Huyen began to show a nervous smile. Yoon turned around and mentioned that Soryung must be helping her stop Seol. She didn't know how Soryung could fall in love with her so suddenly. Soryung's eyes widened in confusion, and he began to show a nervous smile. A moment before, Seol took out a golden ornament. She explained that it was a norigi made of knots. The central piece was designed so that an ice jade could be inserted. Our boy and Huyen remained listening in silence. With a serene gaze, Seol mentioned that although she wasn't very sure why they needed the ice jade, if they were looking for something to carry with them, this wasn't a bad option. Soryung and Huyen began to observe it closely, and their eyes widened in astonishment. She split it in half, revealing that even it could be split in half, it could serve as a symbol between the two. She promised to give it to Soryung if he helped her. Our boy went into shock. Their attention was fixed on the bright ornament. Back in the present, our boy began to think silently. He placed his hand over his chest and made it clear that, as he had already said before, it wasn't because he wanted the norigi. He simply wanted to protect Lady Seol's honor. Yoon's face filled with rage. She knew that Soryung was lying. Seol began to stare at her sister and asked her not to be so impulsive. While Huyen was showing a forced smile, Yoon began to lose her mind since she didn't know what she should do. Several minutes later, they stopped walking. This was the area where she had felt someone's presence. There could be some kind of trace, so she decided to thoroughly check the area. Huyen approached her and with a worried expression asked what they were going to do if the culprit really was a ghost. Seol began to show her sword and promised to cut the ghost with her sword imbued with the energy of destroying evil and revealing justice. Soryong began to observe carefully, realizing that this was intense. Just then, his eyes widened with curiosity and surprise as something caught his attention. Out of nowhere, fog began to appear in the area. Now none of them could see. Soryong began to look from side to side and became confused, not knowing what was happening. He began to shout and call for Seol and the others. He began to walk around the area without knowing if they had been separated. Just then Soryong's foot bumped into something. He became confused, not knowing what was happening. When he looked closely, he realized it was a spiderweb. He grabbed it in his hand and noticed that the thread was very thick, realizing that the creature that had created the web was enormous. At that moment, screams began to be heard. With a gaze full of fear, our boy turned around. He panicked since the voice was Yoon's. He didn't know what had happened to her. Our boy called the little centipedes, Grace and Myra, and asked them if they could find their mother. The little creatures began to smile. They jumped from Soryong's clothes and began to run. Soryong entrusted them with the mission of going and protecting Huyen. Our boy began to run through the forest, realizing that they were being dragged deeper and deeper into the forest. He didn't know why there were spider webs. He began to pant heavily, remembering that spiders were divided into two types, sedentary and wandering. The sedentary ones built a web and stayed in one place, while the wandering ones roamed like vagabonds. The forest was full of spider webs. He knew that no way, none of them wove flat webs on the ground, which meant this was not an ordinary spider. Red fog was all over the forest, and once the fog began to clear, with a serious expression Soryong decided to hurry and find Yoon and the others. Several seconds later, our boy stopped walking. The trees in front of him were full of cobwebs. He began to observe this and his eyes widened in confusion since he didn't know what was happening. At that moment he heard Yoon's voice, and when he lifted his head his eyes widened in fear. She was wrapped in spiderwebs and stuck to a tree. Upon seeing this, our boy panicked. With a surprised gaze, Soryong turned around and saw a woman sitting on top of a giant spider. The woman began to smile. It was Seol, with her eyes shining with evil. She started staring intently at Soryong. So, friends, this chapter comes to an end. What will happen next? We'll uncover it in the next chapter. Don't forget to rate this chapter out of 10 in the comments. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.